not seen the impact of this close on any type of economy that they've been around. So it's definitely giving a lot of people, a lot of districts, trying to think about how do you create a budget knowing that there's going to be multiple times where the governor or the director of budget can go in and balance his budget so he can pay his bills, which is a credible thing to do. I'm not, casting any dispersions on him for that, but that puts school districts in peril. And if you've seen or if you read any of my communications or seen this on social media, we're asking for lots of advocacy. We're trying to generate advocacy to our representatives in Washington for a federal stimulus to offset any type of takebacks that may come into play as you build next year's, as we go into next year. Again, those cuts will be for the fall of 2020.
And not to mention also, we don't even know what September will look like in any school district in New York State. From a physical to the plants to the transportation, which could just add more expenses that we aren't even aware are out there.
So Matt, can you take a moment, and again, any board member who's out in finance, please feel free to jump in, but we spent a lot of time talking about, how do you plan for such uncertainty? How do you build a foundation that's pretty much based on built on a sand foundation because of the inconsistent or the look-backs that may be occurring. So Matt, if you want to jump in, or anyone from audience.
That's a sand foundation with a tsunami outside looming.
You're very optimistic, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to kind of piggyback off of the staffing update that Doug provided, another thing we looked at in trying to balance the budget itself next year is taking a look at our reserves as a group and team and looking at what we have put away over the years, the savings, so to speak, for the employee retirement system, expenses, teacher retirement system, then the other pieces, as well as taking a look at our current year's spending and what we could do to help alleviate, the revenue shortage for next year, as well from the assigned fund balance perspective. So overall, what we looked at doing is bumping up the reserve usage, using more of our savings, so to speak, about $1 million more in savings, and also taking an additional $300,000 to $400,000 more out of surplus at year end and assigning that to next year's budget. So all in all, increasing our savings and fund balance usage by about $1.4 million for next year in an effort to balance, some of the loss of revenue we'll see in sales tax, foundation aid staying flat, and those big pieces. And also keeping in the back of our minds that we may have to take a look at the reserves and savings that we have available, the different reserves where funds are held, and prepare for any mid-year potential aid reduction that could be looming that we're still uncertain of. But again, based on what Brett has mentioned earlier, trying to prepare for the state's fiscal crisis and how that can impact the district.
Matt, have they given us any ability to understand how they're going to organize the look back? How are they going to determine that?
Judy, that's a great question. And, Matt probably can speak about the GEA, the gap elimination that occurred, in between 2011 and 2015, where they actually went in mid-year and took up to 26% 1 year in foundation aid, and then they would take that and say the money's taking that back. The district's taking that, the state's taking that back to offset the gap. Matt?
Yeah, so with the gap elimination adjustment, typically they, each year after that first year, we had an idea in terms of the money. But even before the gap elimination adjustment, there was another, three-letter acronym they used called the DRA, which was Deficit Reduction Assessment. And they did that mid-year also. So essentially the state they may take a look at their budget and their flow of revenue or their expenses that are happening. If they have a shortage, then we've seen, school districts have seen them take money back mid-year.
But in terms of the gap elimination, I mean, we always knew what the impact of that was going to be as we formed our budget. So we just knew that this is how much money they're giving us and this is how much money they're taking back. We knew that right off the bat. Whereas this is probably more similar to the DRA, where they're going to change that midstream. And I guess it's good that we have a plan to use reserves if we have to, or we're building a budget right now anticipating the fact that could happen worst case. My only question would be is the reserve money that we might have to tap into mid-year to pay the bills. Is that do we have access to that money, or do we need to go out for a vote to get access to that money? And are we planning? Is that liquid cash that we have if we need it?
Yeah, so I actually had a conversation with our auditors this morning about the most liquid reserves, and those reserves would be the ones we've been talking about: the teacher retirement system, the employee retirement system, unemployment. Those are three of them. Another one that would be liquid is the workers' comp reserve. So that's another option that provides the ability for the more liquid monies in terms of accessing those. So those are four of the main ones that we have, and we do have funds within those reserves that right now we would deem sufficient to help out with any mid-year adjustments we may need to do, coupled with any other decisions that the districts to make.
And still leaving those reserve accounts with enough funding, knowing that in the next year or two we will probably also have to rely on reserves. So we're not totally taking everything out, where next year we'd be like, oh no, we don't have any money. I mean, it's a very planned, prescriptive manner in which to reduce those reserve accounts, but still keep them healthy.
And our goal, I was going to say, our goal as we look at this year in any spending, our goal is to try to keep those reserve levels, at the ability to be able to manage that over the next few years.
Right.
Judy, I know it says Trevor, but Judy, I don't know if I answered your question, and it is clear as mud.
Yeah.
And it's not always 1 + 1 = 2, and we do know that we are in a volatile environment. We do know that our unemployment rates are the highest that they've been. Jobs have been lost at rates that we haven't seen, and that creates a lot of instability. Gross domestic product is down at Great Depression levels, and we need to make sure that we're being planful at any point in time through any of those look-back periods that we've talked about. If there is money that we don't receive, payments from the state, whether it's foundation aid payments or whether if it's sales tax revenue, that we are prepared to offset it in the way that Matt just described and Tim alluded to as well. So I'm sorry it's not clear, I don't have specifics, but it's up to that 20% is what we're hoping for. We're planning for, not hoping for, planning for, excuse me.
Yeah.
And Tim, I teased you a little bit, but I think in terms of for anybody and everybody who may be watching or wants to watch at a future time, we have to be fairly clear that, a Sandy Foundation with the tsunami waiting outside, we are not entirely sure, but all signs point to some seriousness. And part of that transparency in terms of what I think is we have used in the past as a budgeting tool, we have balanced our budget using reserves, but been able to manage in such a way that those reserves have been preserved and in some years have grown. The likelihood that that's the case this time is much less over the next school year, right? That the planned use of those reserves is likely to occur, right? That we will take those monies and they will be spent and we won't be able to manage them at the same level. And then we're looking at another year after that where that's a possibility as well. So that the real savings that we've had, our savings account is likely to drain. And we've not experienced that too much, but that's why we have them as well, right? But we just have to be realistic that balancing our budget with reserves is one time. There comes a point where your savings goes away, and we have to either find that plan to not have to use savings anymore or get the economy working.
So, and talk about transition comes with lots of conversations about PPE, right? Personal protective equipment, change in schedules, possible more technology, definitely more technology to continue to prepare. So there's costs that are going to be associated with that. So any type of savings that we have or that is reportedly out there, we need to be planful in how we, support the students with social emotional needs, how we plan curricularly speaking, how do we put in the right health and safety guidelines, which we will have to be work very closely with Monroe County Department of Health and our, drawing a blank.
SED.
Thank you.
Yeah.
SED.
Brett, just curious, I don't want to take you too far off track, because I know we're talking about finances right now, but you brought up the point, now that we have clarity that we're not going to be starting school until the fall, obviously there's going to be planning put in place to what that's going to look like, and that's not just a Fairport deal, that's a Monroe County deal, and that's a New York State deal. I assume that you're engaged in conversations with other superintendents and SED around the guidelines and what that's going to have to look like for our district.
100%, and, I spent, 2 hours on a call this afternoon just talking about these details and the budget and budget timeline details, which is a part of this conversation. The CDC is what I was going for, not SED. I apologize, I got all my acronyms. But, we'll be following those recommendations very closely. Those networks that, you just mentioned, we're talking frequently, and we think that, we work well together and going to be doing a lot of the similar type of actions moving forward when it talks about bringing kids back.
Okay, so just a quick question, Brett, are you anticipating anything that's going to be significant enough that we're going to have to really account for that within our budget as we're moving forward?
Well, you look at all of the health and safety equipment we got to bring in, the personal protective items that we were just mentioning, like from gloves, thermometers, to masks that we need to supply. These need to be purchased in large quantities. We're looking at wash stations, sanitizing stations. So these were costs that we didn't have, right? So these are,
as is every school district in the country.
Yeah, and we're looking at buying them in bulk. We're looking at maximizing our BOCES, relationships and partnerships. But at the end of the day, that's still going to be a cost that wasn't there that we need to honor, obviously.
So that goes back to Peter's comment that there's a good chance that we may have to go back into that savings account throughout the year. But we also have to look at the budget that Nat and you have put together, Brett, that not only are we taking money from our savings, we are drastically reducing spending in many areas. So it's this budget is hitting all areas that you can hit in a budget.
Yep, and yes, we've had to make some decisions. The board set some really clear parameters, so we can continue to, create a program that meets the community's needs, that meets our students' needs, and we feel confident and comfortable that we still have that.
Have we added to the budget monies to cover everything they just described? I mean, I saw Dr. Mendoza interview the other day, and he mentioned most of what you just said. He said the 4 things he'd be looking for in a plan would be how would we cover faces, keep hands clean, distance the students, and disinfect all surfaces continuously, because obviously during the day they're going to get contaminated. So those were 4 things he listed. Have we added to the budget for all of those extras that we'll have to purchase, the wash stations and all that?
Matt, I know that you're working closely with our Director of Buildings and Grounds. I know that part of the transition team that we're assembling, that's part of the analysis that's going on. Has there been line items at this time? I would say no, but have we allocated dollars in general funds to be able to say this is what we would use that budget line for? Wash sinks, sanitizer, gloves, thermometers. I know that's what Matt, that's what he does.
Yep, so right now.
I was just going to say that I get myself into a loop here, but that usually would be state aidable, no? changes, like adding wash stations? No?
As of now, no. Unless the state puts something forth that they're gonna aid those pieces like they did with water testing. Or they aid the, testing of water for lead, every 5 years. I believe we have to do that, so they'll aid that from a building aid standpoint, but as of now, there's no aid for these pieces. We've already looked at this year of trying to prepare for, next year, with some of these pieces, such as the wash stations, the masks, hand sanitizer, some of those things that we can take any savings we're having now and try to prepare ourselves for next year. And within the facilities budget, we may just have to realign the expenses depending on what other purchases would be needed and what supplies are needed more, some of those different pieces as we've done, and adjusted whether it's certain repairs that would get done or not get done, or any of those different pieces, which is done annually to prioritize what the true needs are at the time. So yeah, we are working to plan and prepare and be working with Aaron, the director of facilities, to identify some more of those things of what we see as we develop the plan. As Brett mentioned, schools are now put in the position that now we have to look and develop a plan for how do we reopen if that is exactly what happens in September. So we're trying to, we'll be doing all that, a lot of that work will be happening.
So, which brings us to our budget timeline. It's a fluid conversation. So I think that's where we're going to talk next about this timeline. I'm going to try to get back up to the screen.
Can I jump in instead, or
Sure.
before we go there?
Yeah.
Because some of the things I think in terms of talking about, since there are out years, and I had put it in my notes, I don't know if it hit the agenda necessarily, is other longer-term efficiencies we possibly can look at, but that is not possible to get into the next year's budget, right? But if we're going to be impacted for 2 or 3 more years after that, things we possibly look at, just throwing whether it's out ideas or as a board, do we give direction to have these studied more? One of them has been, we've been talking about it anyway, so I don't think it's necessarily new, whether we look at redistricting so that it saves on transportation. If we have social distancing such, and I'm shooting from the hip here, so unfortunately that means it's public, right? If we have social distancing as such that our students are coming in shifts, that seems like it will increase transportation costs, right? The buses will be running the same route twice and picking up every other student or something like that. Does that mean we look at redistricting those so that the busing at least is more efficient as possible? That's an efficiency I don't think we can get in place for next year, but I think we should consider looking at it long term. We still have disposition of other properties. It's likely not something we can take care of for next year, but to help support our reserves through doing something with them, that's more an executive session to a degree, but I think that's something we may want to consider also as of looking at additional properties that we have and what we might do. Are there others, that we say, okay, this isn't for next year, but it might be for the following or even 2 years from now, as other ways to use the assets that we do have to support our reserves and support our operations?
Well, Peter, not only with transportation, not only, could you be doing a double run every day, but you have to put a third of the kids on each run because of distancing on the buses, which means you may have to do 4 runs a day, 3 runs a day. So it's, I can see, oh, and by the way, we already have a shortage of drivers.
Right.
I can see where our transportation costs could significantly go up. And right now, fuel is inexpensive, but as people start getting on the road more, those prices will probably jump up a little bit, not significant, I don't think, because I think the number of people traveling will still be lighter than what it had been back in the fall of last year. But there is some significant.
So
costs.
if you recall, before we entered into this surreal situation, the board had talked with transportation, and we talked about doing a reassessment and reevaluation of our routes, and that holds possibilities, consolidating routes, making sure we're running them as efficient as possible. But again, that's going to take some time. We're not going to be ready to do that immediately. But I have a bucket, and I'm adding these pieces into future conversations about what can we do to put ourselves in the best financial place without impacting program and staff.
a significant impact to whatever these costs are going to be, transportation, routes, and is going to be the method by which we come back in the fall, right? And, you know, it's going to be very difficult for, I mean, we can speculate, you know, around what the impact is going to be, but until we know what we're going to do in terms of staggering the start times for different kids or every other day or whatever, it's going to really have a dramatic impact on the overall financial situation. So as soon as we know more about what that's going to look like, I think we can drill in on that, but otherwise we're just kind of guessing at this point.
So you're 100% correct again, and you add the dramatic economic time that we're entering in, that makes for some very unusual circumstances in trying to leverage ourselves as much as we can with our reserves and our long-term and short-term planning, I think is ultimately, you know, the place where we need to live.
Yeah, and again, so it wasn't to say a decision, but to start gathering ideas of where we think we as a board would want the administrations to start taking a look at, right? So, yeah, you know, the facts on the ground are still changing on a weekly basis. We do know at least that school is done for the rest of this school year, but we don't know necessarily about next year yet to make solid plans. But we need to gather our ideas and know where we want to start looking for opportunities to help us preserve what it is we want out of our school district.
Let's make sure that we don't say school is done. Let's just say that the kids are not going to be coming back to the school building. School is still going on until the end of June. We need to really make sure that that is repeated a lot, because I don't want children to start thinking that summer is here.
No, thanks. I will try to change my language. You're right.
Yeah, just.
Our weather will help us and remind us of that quite frequently.
Yeah, especially if it snows.
I doubt that there are very many kids who are watching this right now, quite frankly.
Right.
Probably right.
Right.
So with this.
But we also don't want the teachers to think that we think they're on vacation. They're working hard. Should convey that.
They certainly are. And, you know, we'll have clarity on the last day of school very soon. I know that, you know, that's of interest, so, you know, staff knows how to pace the remainder of their time with students. And I know that there's lots of groups talking about how do we add closure to the year, and we need to do that in a very thoughtful way too. And then talk about how do you support a transition back to school. So all of those are part of greater conversations that we'll be talking about in a little bit. But here...
Just real quickly, I mean, maybe it goes without saying, but obviously when we think about the fall and we think about the impact of the potential transportation issues, and, you know, again, we don't know anything, so as soon as you have guidance for us, I think it'll be a good conversation, but what's going to be the impact of fall sports as well, because, you know, given if we have a season in the fall, or if we don't have a season in the fall, that has a tremendous impact on transportation needs there as well, so, you know, we're just going to have to piece all this together, given the parameters that we know once they're really settled and presented to us.
Yeah, and the governor did ask, and he said in the plan, he'd want to know when we would begin extracurriculars. So I don't think he anticipates that starting right off the bat. And if we're distancing, I think that's the big thing. Are we still distancing? Which Dr. DeRosa seems to feel we will be doing. So I can only assume that's what we'll be still distancing. That'll make a big difference.
Yeah, and that's going to be a Western New York or Monroe County strategy and guideline. It's not just going to be Fairport, right? So if it's going to be a football season, that's going to be a Monroe County.
But it goes beyond the athletics, though, too. And I would say that, you know, our arts and the performing arts, our ensembles, I mean, we're built for 50 or more. I mean, you know, what happens in those choirs and you know, orchestras, et cetera, our plays, it affects us significantly. And how do you rethink that? What does that look like? That will be the next conversation.
Well, as the governor said today, because schools are social places. That's why schools, they're the epitome of social places. And, you know, that's what they are. And so it's redefining a whole mindset.
Talking about redefining a whole mindset is this budget timeline that is needed to have been adjusted on the fly. Matt, as you have done in the past, you know, this is the new rendition of what that looks like. We'll also be talking about board elections and our obligations with, the board elections and those who are interested in vying for an incumbent seat that's due. So, Matt?
Yeah, so, as the executive order came out, we worked to develop a draft timeline based on interpretation of the order. And the main first piece that comes up is the legal notice. So that itself, we've got on the docket really to try to get out to the papers tomorrow, working to revise the legal notice with the new dates in it and all the new information. Has to be published by May 12th. So that's the big deadline, that's coming up here in the very near future. Now it's been revised to only have to publish twice. So instead of having to publish 4 times like it's been in the past, we have to publish it twice with the first publication by May 12th. The next big piece is May 11th. You see it'd be a need to add a special meeting to look at adopting the revised legal notice and the text proposition that just has the right date in it, and reviewing the final budget draft and property tax report card for adoption. Now, the technical due date of both of those is May 21st. However, if we're in a position, we looked at May 11th, and we've been talking about May 11th for a little bit of time for adoption when we were looking at June 9th. So that would be the next piece as we look there. And then May 12th, some of these are just the business office, items of getting the property tax report card to the state submitted, and then working through the commentator pieces. The May 19th, as you know, for now, at this time, there's no deadline for this piece, but kind of looked at about 3 weeks in advance of the vote of getting the postcard notice out. So there is a requirement to get a postcard notice that talks about the date of the hearing, the date of the election hearing, definition of a qualified voter, and then send an absentee ballot out to eligible voters with a stamped return envelope. So those pieces have to go out to the voters to let them know of those pieces. So really, that notice has to happen before the hearing in order to let folks know when the hearing is going to be.
No, ma'am, I was reading that document, the executive order, and it said that the hearing was adjourned.
Adjourned does not mean it's not to be held. So we still have
I was very perplexed as to why they used the term adjourned, because it did not make sense to me.
From what I understand, it's a term they've used for a long time regarding the voting piece from a colleague, as we circulated information, but the hearing itself still has to be held. So that's been advised. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Adjourned in the order doesn't appear to sound clear.
No.
So
because when you adjourn something, you end it.
Correct. Yep.
And are we going to have a Zoom hearing?
Yep. It would remote
Just
hearing.
like this where people can hear us and see us?
Just like we're doing now, it needs to be,
Yep.
it needs to be recorded, just like we do now, it's recorded on YouTube, and hopefully we'll be able to continue with Facebook Live to put it out as much as possible. The big piece is, how are we going to get the absentee ballots out and the eligible voters? Lots of details that we're trying to work through. We're a larger district, and, how do you count those? Do you use a scanning document to help with that process? How do we confirm who is an eligible voter? It's 18 years of age. They need to be registered through the DMV. There's notices that we obligated to share with them. So lots of details we're trying to iron out, not just Fairport, but Monroe County. So the larger districts, and we're incorporated in that, have another level of lift.
So Brett, the eligible voter list is generated by the DMV, not by the Board of Elections?
No, there is
No,
the Board of, Matt, please.
Yeah, Board of Elections, the county Board of Elections generally should have all the information for registered voters. However, it's probably by town. So it's typically not broken down by school district.
Right. Yeah, it's by voting district.
But you can go through the DMV and then register that way. That was guidance that we received.
So it is guidance of registered voters, because it says qualified voters, right?
Right.
And I don't know
Yeah,
if that-
qualified 18 years of age or older, right?
Right, because technically, to vote for school board, you do not have to be a registered
You
voter.
don't, but you have to demonstrate that you are of qualifying to be 18
Correct.
years
You
of
have-
age,
right.
resident, et cetera, 30 days in the district. And again, that's where that link to the DMV can help streamline that process.
And we bear the cost of this?
Oh, yes.
The district?
Yes.
And
And
have we estimated how much that's gonna be?
Still working through all those details.
I'd be curious to see, compare that to running the actual vote, because there's an expense there. And I'd be curious to see if it's close, if it's different, if, maybe it's, who knows? We may find that that's less expensive way to do it, I don't know. I mean, so,
Well, we have these pieces of, right, there'll be printing costs, there'll be mailing costs, postage. Obviously, there will be some savings in terms of the inspector work. However, we still need to determine what the requirement is for actually counting the votes. How are we able to do that? Do we have to have it certified by an election inspector? A lot of those different pieces, like we always have in the past, when it's run.
Right.
In the gym, they still do certifying, sign off on the vote results and everything there. So that part, I haven't seen any guidance in terms of,
and
So I was on a call this afternoon, and these questions all came up, and Dan White will be, speaking to, legal to get these questions ironed out from, the electioneer, how do we certify the votes, to the type of ballots, the costs associated with them, the number of ballots you could put like inside the commentator, with the envelope, and then you need to put another envelope to certify it as well.
But and then you also have to realize too that then you've got to rely on the United States Postal Service that is going to be inundated, because every school district on June 9th is having to vote. But what does that mean? Because you get your, who knows when you mail it in, and it might be 3 or 4 or 5 days before we get the results, because of the counting and because of the mail. It's going to be a very interesting situation.
So there is no roadmap, right? And, lots of questions, and we're trying to take the model that we've always done and trying to back it into this world that we're living in. And that's why there's this uncertainty and, what appears to be, disorganized. It's because
it is.
It is.
But you're right.
Life is disorganized at the moment.
Yeah. If it's a postmark date, right, we may not get it till the 10th or the 11th, right, and have to count for several days.
well, the guidance we've seen right now is it's due back by 5 p.m. on the vote day.
On that date, so postmark won't satisfy, you have to.
On the
put
9th?
enough.
Yeah, not that I've seen in the guidance so far. It said the guidance I've seen is due back by 5 p.m. on the 9th.
And if we
So if
get
it-
those in early, how are we keeping them safe and secure?
We'd have to
until
secure them.
count?
We'd have to come up with a process. Again, there's a cost associated with that, and we'll happily do that, because it's, our responsibility, but we would have to secure them, and we'd have to.
I'm sure there'll be a number of days, a window of which you can mail it back. You can mail it back within this window, type of thing.
That would be great.
Hopefully.
That would be great.
That would just help streamline it. You've got these 4 days to mail it back.
Yeah. Maybe, I mean, right now, absentee ballots and a regular, for the regular election each year that we have, not in this format. Those are all due back to us before, to count the votes, so we're trying to lose the day of the vote. So I don't know if they'll come up with something different on this, situation.
And because it's mail-in, there's a potential that there could be a larger number of people voting.
Much larger, yep. We will learn a lot from this effort.
Sure will.
I don't know if we'll repeat it, but we'll learn a lot.
Yep.
And then included with this is also the elections. Do you want to discuss that now or wait?
Well, I mean, we can discuss it right now. You just have to send your interest, your letter of intent by Monday, May 11th to our district clerk, and we're going to put this on our website in the next day or so to explain the exact directions and what we're trying to, what we need to the parameters we need to follow. So qualifications include you need to be a citizen of the United States, resident within the Fairport Central School District for a continuous and uninterrupted time for at least 1 year prior to the day of the election, 18 years of age, or older, able to read or write, may not have been removed from any school district office within the preceding year, may not reside with another member of the same school board as a member of the same family, cannot be a current employee of the district, and you can't have a comparable public office. It's incompatible. So those are the pieces that we'll be able to really define. We're going to put it on our website. We'll make sure it's available on our social media so people can also, there's a candidate biography form. We're going to try to make that all come together so if and when we do mail the commentator, they're a part of the commentator.
And I'm just going to say this because I want people to understand that, granted, we don't have an opportunity to put this in the commentator about putting your name on the ballot because of the short window of time that the governor has given us. So I want them to understand, by like you just said, Brett, all the electronic media, we are being as transparent as we possibly can be in this situation.
Yep, and then June 9th will be the time, 5 o'clock, I think Mr. Stevens said, that's our time when these are due. I do believe we have heard that, yes, you can start accepting them, but you can't really do too much with them until that time at 5 p.m. on June 9th. We're trying to get clarification, because if we could vote and count and tally as they come in, that might help us. But again, by absentee ballot, and we are responsible for getting those out to the community, and that's what we're trying to find out, what's the best way to do that.
In general elections, the absentee ballot counting isn't until after the polls close, because that's you don't want to sway a vote by having information ahead of time.
Correct. Yeah.
But this is not general election, and it's not normal.
You're correct, though. We generally count the absentee ballots even in the school election after the polls close.
Yeah.
Right. Then they have to be served.
Until several days after the fact.
Right.
That should just be planned and transparent.
Well,
Yeah.
clearly, yes,
Right.
yes.
Let people know we're not going to know for a couple days.
But there's questions out there about if they do come in. I just, based upon what we just were talking about today, and we'll get clarification on that, and our process will be tightened up as we move along.
Brett,
That's fine.
this is going to be 100% remote mail-in ballot. We're not going to offer any live polling at all?
Nope.
Okay.
It's absentee ballot. We mail those out yearly. We'll be doing it to everyone, though. People will have to request the number they need for their household.
They will, so.
Well, again, we
We mail out the application first.
We have to like develop the details, but do you put the ballots in the commentator, put 2 in there, one for, two guardian or parent households, with 2 envelopes and a larger envelope that needs to be signed and secured and then mailed back. So that's what we would be looking to do. And then saying, hey, if you need more, right, let us know and we'll mail them to you.
So I would think that we're not going to have results back for several days after the election. I mean, it's going to take a long time to count these things.
But it's how are we, controlling, not sending too many?
So
Yep,
the guidance has been, for those that may not have a voter registration list for the district, the guidance has been at this point recommended to mail at least 1 ballot per household. Brett and I both talked about whether that's 1 or 2 ballots. As we look at that piece with directions that with the 1 ballot, then they would need to request an additional ballot if they need more than just the 1 ballot. So those are, a lot of those thoughts have been thrown around, so maybe a challenge for districts to get an actual voter registration list for their specific district, because it could be by town. So that's it. And those are the details that we're working through in terms of how many do we send out, again, balancing the cost and all those different pieces.
And especially that's going to be a little bit more difficult because those children who are registered and students of our district, we know how many parents are in their households. But the residents who don't have children in the district, that's going to be up in the air.
And we need to make sure that we get those ballots to those families.
Like your situation at your home, Brett, you need 3. And yet you'd have 2 mailed to you.
Right?
Yeah, that's why Brett and I talked about this 2 makes sense instead of 1, through that to prevent the the number of requests for an additional ballot. Also getting that postcard notice and ballot out early enough so that they have time for that turnaround for us to go and get another ballot mailed out and for them to get that back to us.
And what makes this, go ahead, Marty.
I was going to say, did I not read also that we have to send a stamped envelope with this?
Yes, we do.
Mm-hmm. And having worked in elections before, working with the Board of Elections, sometimes your mail-in vote, your absentee ballots, sometimes can create some potential for fraud. This opens up all sorts of new issues about people mailing in 2 or 3. How do we check? How do we verify? How do we, it's a lot of checks and balances that are going to need to be in place. And obviously we'll be relying on our friends in the election department of elections there, the Office of Election Board of Elections.
Especially since you don't need to be a registered voter to vote in this.
Correct.
You just have to be qualified.
Right, so even that, to get names from the Board of Elections, if people aren't registered, they still may want a ballot, so this seems very convoluted. But we'll do whatever they tell us, that's the thing, and whoever asked about not having a place to come to vote, it has to be, that's clearly not our doing, that's by the governor's instructions. So just so people understand, we didn't decide this mail-in thing, this is the governor who's told us that it has to be all mail-in.
My suggestion, as we get closer to that, you know how we always put signs up in front of the district office about the upcoming vote? I think it's important that we put up a sign in front of each building maybe, identifying the fact that there will not be an in-person vote, that your ballots have been mailed to you. I think if we put that in our buildings, in the front lawns, that will also help people say, oh, I didn't get that, I better check.
Thanks, Tim. Yep.
Of course, following the local sign laws. just have to say that as the other hat.
So if there's any other questions, we can proceed, or do you want to continue?
I'm fine, or other things you want to flesh out or discuss more relative to the budget development, the timeline, elections?
I will communicate.
Just keep us in the loop as you get your direction on how this is going to go. So if we receive questions from people, we can answer them. We'll know, what's going on. But I know you always keep us in the loop, so.
Thank you, and most certainly, and I appreciate your patience as we work through all the questions and details.
And again, I think the most important date as of today is May 11th is the deadline to get your name in, and should you be interested in putting your name on the ballot to be a member or in running for a member of the school board.
And I'll be putting a notification out on our website and through our social media, just reminding them of that process with that information.
Good.
So the next topic of conversation, if we want to follow order here,
Yep.
we've sort of started talking about the transition and spending a lot of time over the past several weeks thinking about our return. And I won't, give you the whole document to inundate you with all the finer details, but, there'll be groups coming together to speak to the constraints. These groups include, before I get into the actual goals and the charge and the process, these groups will be a building-based site management group that talks about, what are the specific details we need to open our buildings. This will be geared by our principals. And what does the master schedule look like under different scenarios? And we are looking at multiple different scenarios, a range of options that we need to consider. Right? And we'll be looking at the constraints, the feedback we get from our stakeholders. There's a thought exchange out there that we are really encouraging people to participate in because the community's input will be important. We're going to try to address as much as we can in our transition groups. Staff also has a staff exchange, thought exchange out there that asks them what are the most important things they feel we need to consider and keep in mind. Again, completely understand and be immersed in the potential scenarios and the inherent variables in each one of those scenarios. Develop priorities, synthesize our collective thoughts into an actionable plan, and then operationalize those plans. That's the goal. Again, there's transition groups building-based. There's a curriculum and instruction group that's going to focus in on what do you do with the gaps? What do you do with our curriculum maps? How do we know where students are? We'll be working with lead teachers in those groups, our coaches in those groups, and of course our administrators, our curriculum and instruction team will be a part of that group. We have a mental health focus area group. That's going to be a major component of any transition. We need to be intentional with our approach to our trauma, illness, and grief that we have embraced in our district. There's a consortium out there that is giving us really good feedback in ways that we can transition students back. Then you have food service. There's a group there that's focusing on how are we going to feed these children? How are we going to get them through our cafeterias in a socially distant, safe manner? We have our buildings and grounds component, and of course our transportation. And each one of these groups will be feeding into the site-based group, speaking to how are the buildings and grounds cleaning procedures. There's going to be intense sanitation efforts. There's going to be sanitizer. There's going to be new wash sinks. There's going to be, what does 6 feet look like at elementary school? How do we build and model that for them, right? So all these groups need to be working interdependently, but they'll be working dependently and then coming together interdependently to work with the site management group.
Hey,
Brad, go ahead, Damon.
Just, this is great. I assume that at least at appropriate schools, we're also going to have students involved as stakeholders and giving their feedback. But I also just curious about what about looking at other best practices at other districts? I mean, everybody through this, and we're essentially reinventing how we go to school now. So I just think it would be very valuable to look outside of just Fairport to learn from what other people are doing and see what works for us.
See, I was hoping that the next step is you get all this information and the input from our group, you get that, Brett, and then you and all your superintendents share, here's what we've come up with in Fairport, here's what we've come up with in Victor, here's what we've come up with. What are some things, because you might hear something from Canandaigua that's like, oh, wait a minute, we never thought of that. Or
so we'll
there may be a...
Yeah, this like we've been networked throughout this entire process. We'll continue to learn from each other. And again, the CDC, Monroe County Department of Health, SED, the governor, everybody's going to have guidelines and expectations, and we're going to do our best and continue to communicate in the way that we have, and making sure that what's it even look like? What does a partial day look like? Is it a 4-day week? Is it a 5? Is it a rotating schedule? What do you do?
Is it an alternate schedule, flip-flop, one day? Brett, one thing with the mental health piece, I hope that you also investigate the mental health needs of our adults in the buildings as well.
If you look at the scenarios, and again, we can talk about the scenarios at length, that's a very important component. Thanks, Tim. The thought exchange that I put out to staff, they're giving some really good feedback and information about, hey, we have concerns, we have needs too, health needs. Like there's real family situations that they need to be cognizant of, and we need to be respectful of. And I know that the board has similar expectations that, we have to honor those. That feeds into the cost piece that I think Joyce was talking about. That's an unknown cost to this, because if somebody's in a compromised situation, that will be something that we need to deal with and manage, and we would do that with, the utmost care.
Currently, I'm going to guess that there are very few, if any, sick days or personal days being used since March 16th, correct?
Correct.
So, and again, that's going to have to be placed back in, and you may see more of those necessary for our adults. Obviously, right now, we're not paying for any substitute teachers. Again, that's going to be an expense that we budget for, but that may be a little bit more than we've had in the past. How do we deal with substitute teachers coming into a building?
So I'll be looking to have, you know, one or two board members part of the task force when we receive the report, so we could talk about, you know, who that representative would be, and then we could bring that to the larger group as we learn more, as the accountability groups that I call them report to us. And part of that task force is our Director of Student Services, Deborah Miles. We have a PTA rep, two PTA reps, and our medical doctor who we employ, and Colleen Cole as well.
Brett, who from the state is kind of spearheading this? Anybody?
You know, we're connected with different groups, different like superintendent groups that, you know, we're networked with, but as far as there's not a point person at the state. Now, we know that the Board of Regents is putting forth a task force as well, and that's going to be consisting of, you know, board members, practitioners, and superintendents, and health officials, and they're.
So basically, this is up to each individual district to kind of come up with their own plan.
Yeah, yeah, but again, the regulations that we adhere to will be right in line with the best practices out there, and we'll be tying tight, you know, with our BOCES networks here.
Well, you know, it makes me feel better that we are the ones in the driver's seat with this one for us and for our kids. I think that's important. And you'll start these meetings sooner than later?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're starting to have these conversations again. The site-based management ones. I know Matt is working with his group, which is the transportation pieces, the food service pieces, buildings and grounds pieces. Those pieces are incredibly important to the transition. But again, it's still a shot in the dark because are we going to have summer school, right? And in my perfect scenario, I would love to have a modified summer school so we could start transitioning and get our most vulnerable or those students who need the greatest amount of support, get them in, right?
Yeah. Start that transition in the summer.
Yeah, but again, I might not have control over that, but, you know, Monroe County Department of Health will help us make that.
And the governor isn't going to say, he's not going to make any decision about summer school till the end of May, he said.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be important too, is most of everyone's been out of the building since the 16th or 17th of March, that it's going to be important for your stakeholders to start going back one or two and walking the buildings again to see the physical restraints. And because there are things that we remember, but until we see that doorway or this bathroom or that particular, you know, that's going to need to be part of the plan as well. Wow. And we all have to have this done by September.
Well, it's better than June.
This is true. This is true. This is true.
Done by September.
And it may not be September, we have to wait and see.
Now,
It's
tomorrow,
all a wait and see game.
Wednesday, Bob Clark is meeting with seniors and families on Facebook Live. In here, we'll be in here talking about closure, talking about how do we make something that has come upon us, and how do we manage it so it's meaningful and memorable for their end of the year. And juniors also have lots at stake because they're in the college prep phase. So, you know, adding closure is incredibly important, but then the transitions from 5 to 6 and, you know, pre-K to K, and, you know, 9 to 10, 5 to 6.
And our seniors who are going to go on to further education, they have to deal with that whole situation too. How do you go to college? How do you know, the colleges and universities, I have a neighbor who's the director of facilities at Nazareth, and he said they have got to start figuring out how are they going to go back in the fall or in August.
What are we doing, Brett, for kids that are coming in as kindergartners next year?
Well, we're registering them, right?
Okay.
And, you know, it's open enrollment, and we're watching those numbers very carefully. And actually, you know, when they come to us, how do we get to know them? That's the biggest that's the biggest question, the most important question that I know that our principals are, very mindful of, making sure that we understand where they are.
Brett, I know that you, in your last communication with the public and with the families, mentioned that if you have lost your job to apply for the lunches,
Yeah.
have you seen any results of that?
Not since the communication. We hope that we see an uptick because we do.
Our lunches are still up in the 450 range?
Now we're 450, 500, right?
Okay.
Now
And the communication said that that's to go all the way through October?
No, the communication said that you apply for free and reduced lunch, and then that will, when we do come back to school, that will allow us to continue that program through October.
Okay, because the way the governor made it sounded like lunches were going to go through the summer. I said, I don't think that's true.
Well, we're trying to get clarification on that, Tim, because, budget-wise, we need to make sure that, we can afford that as well. So the governor's got to continue to give us guidance on that. I think we'll happily do that.
Sure.
We normally don't provide summer nourishment, but that's not saying that we can't or won't. It's just that we're trying to get more guidance on that.
And are we just doing lunches or are we doing breakfast as well?
We do breakfast and lunch.
Okay, so they can pick up both.
Yep, yep.
Okay. Who would have thought in the year 2020?
Yeah, back to fundamentals, right?
It's been interesting. I've been seeing some news reports and of the polio epidemic. And, they said it's very similar to that. My mother was talking about the scarlet fever epidemic that was in the 30s and in the 40s and how houses would have quarantine on the house.
Yeah, yep. This will be an ongoing conversation. It'll be
I'm sure.
But I just think it's important that you recognize that we're starting to have those conversations and mobilize around, the new guidance that we received on Friday. And as soon as we heard that, we met and started talking about logistics and the multiple different scenarios that are out there.
Marty and Judy and Joyce and Brett, I've been thinking since our meeting on Friday, how is this going to affect our policies? Do we need to develop policies? Do we need to alter policies? Because this is something I think that is not going to be a one and done for 100 years.
BOCES will give us guidance on that. That's why we.
Yes.
Okay.
I think there are specific policies that are to be added regarding distance learning, for example, but that will come through the Erie BOCES.
Okay, thank you.
And there'll also be collective bargaining implications here as well. And, Doug Loff is integral to those conversations, working with our union leaders, who we have positive partnerships with. But we need to be mindful of that, and that goes into some of those questions we were talking about earlier, about the unforeseen pieces of, what we're responsible for.
I think everyone needs to be mindful of that.
Is there anything else? We have about 30 minutes around this topic, but as we know, there's still a lot of unknowns. It's also just beginning, but a good outline, I think, overall, Brett.
We'll have many more 30 minutes around this topic, I'm sure.
Yes, I think so, as we get into greater details. And as, again, we learn more things, as facts on the ground continue to change. And so, but.
Yeah, in so many ways, it feels like right now we're guessing because we're just waiting for more guidance on so many different things.
So that's why
you don't even.
I'm sorry, Judy.
Oh, no, go ahead.
That's why right now I'm making a big deal, and it's a really important deal in my mind, is those thought exchanges, because that's giving us something to at least understand what's on our community's mind, what's on our teachers and educators and staff's mind about bringing them back. And a lot of that, hopefully, we'll be able to back into these scenarios. What does the community expect moving forward, I think, is something that the board is interested to know. And of course, as we talk about transitioning back, I know our building principals want to know that too. So that to me is like we're in this fact-finding, information gathering stage, so those thought exchanges are very important. I'm putting another plug out there for them. We'll be
The biggest thing about those thought exchanges, Brett, is it provides us who are making these decisions so many different perspectives. Campaigning for an elected office, you walk door to door, you talk to people. And when I've done that 3 times, 4 times, I can't remember now. Every time I'd stop and finish a conversation, I'd turn around and take a 2 or 3 second view, because when I'm standing in that individual's front door and I'm looking out on the village of Fairport, that's their village. My village is my perception here. And having the perception from the student, having the perception from the parent who has a medically fragile situation in their home or who doesn't have a job, those perceptions are so important because we don't necessarily have those same perceptions.
The student component of this, and I think somebody mentioned it, Damon, they're going to be an integral part of the transitions. Like, how, what are the things that are we missing at the end of the day? Like, we're going to be counting on, their insights. Because at the end of the day, it's through their eyes. That's what we should be looking at.
Right. There are some students who actually find this to be very relieving. There are some students who are like, oh, I'm so glad I don't have the pressure of having to find someone to go to senior ball. There are students who are okay with the way they're learning right now.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, there's some students that are thriving in this environment, and there's some students that really struggle. And I think conversely, there's students that really struggle having to attend school for kids that thrive. So it's just a different venue, different environment. It's good for some and not good for others. So, you just have to adapt.
Yeah, I was just thinking that I think we've examined this in the past, but we should look at year-round schooling. In addition, possibly additional testing out of classes by students and advancement from grade to grade, not based upon chronology, but based upon the students' abilities. All of those things, and possibly even having some of our students going to college in their senior year as opposed to going to high school. I mean, those are all just thoughts that I've had.
I think
there's been so many discussions, well, as long as I've been involved in education, and that's sadly a very long time, everyone's talked about the 20th century model, and it's an old model and turn of the century and all of that. I wish that we would be able to take advantage of this pause to make some big changes, but I think everyone's scurrying and there's too much else to do that I don't think the country would even consider such a thing. That I think
This is great.
We really, education needs some big changes, and
this is a great opportunity for those philosophical discussions.
yeah, I don't know if anybody's up for that under a state of emergency.
That's really the only time to do that, actually.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Absolutely does.
I mean, that's what the president is doing. He's taking advantage of the state of emergency. So,
Unfortunately, the majority of the people are just wanting to be able to get back to shopping and getting back to working and things like that. And education, I haven't heard many people talking about schools and education.
I've been talking to a lot of teachers, and they would say that they see that there's opportunities here that we can continue to build upon. So I don't think that was far off, Kevin. And I think that people see that there's opportunities here. There's things that we could do better as an organization here, and just continue to move forward in that vein. Thank you.
Okay, our next topic then is obviously money related as well. The big capital improvement project that was approved by the voters in December. And what does the current situation do for us in this? All right.
So we're in the second phase there where it says 2020 right? We're in the design phase, submitting to SED. And I know that we've had some very preliminary conversations, about the scope of the project. We're starting to, again, get into the nitty-gritty of design. And we just thought it would be prudent to have this conversation about where we are. And, this was in 2019 in December. This project was approved. And, there are pieces to this that need to move forward. And we need to continue to, again, take a pulse and understand, our expectations of our community.
Brett, is the campus construction design crew, have they been working on this, or are they on a pause as well?
Well, initially, everybody was on a pause, but, we have been having, again, preliminary conversations in the design phase. The high school, there's lots of work that needs to occur. The work with the vestibules, all those pieces, the multi-purpose field that was part of the scope of this project. And I sort of outlined all the different pieces here. You've seen all these before, but herein lies all of the different work and the scope of the work that needs to occur at FHS and the timelines that are associated with them, and then of all the other buildings as well. We're still on pace to achieve all of our timelines, but again, just to have a prudent conversation of the path moving forward, because we are in definitely different economic times than we were in December. What are the reasons why we would want to continue with the capital project staying on course? I think it's important that we have that conversation, the pros and cons to that.
Concern I do have is with state funding. They told us that is guaranteed, but I don't think anything is guaranteed today. As much as they say it is guaranteed that we will get the funding that when we went through to the voters with this, that we said this is the funding we will get. I'm just concerned that at any time that may be reduced, that could be taken away. There could be a moratorium put on any building projects, because we really don't know the full economic hit to the state. We know it's going to be in the tens of billions. But I think that we need to keep that in mind, that even though they say it's guaranteed, it's a state that is beyond financially constrained at the time. So I just.
So if you look at the pros and cons, it sort of speaks to that,
Yep.
We will be entering into an environment where people are going to need and want to work in a consistent phase. And I think the state sees that as a benefit. Like, we need to get people back to work, and whatever they can do to support that, i.e. these capital projects, would be one way that can continue. Now, you're right, future projects, there might be different aid ratios that we might be dealing with and putting us in different conversations. But the projects that were approved, December 2019 is one of those. The funding and all those pieces still apply. Bids will come in. They're seeing that already. Organizations or groups that have never bid on school projects are coming in, so it's going to be more of a competitive bid environment. Low bond rates, minimize. Any type of delay would only increase future costs. So, the reason why we want to stay on schedule is to minimize those escalation costs. The local construction jobs, like I was alluding to.
From my perception, Brett, I mean, it's, without having this sound in a bad way, this is actually a great time to invest. And because of all the factors you talked about, and the fact that we've already had this approved by the voters, we already know this is a priority. This pandemic will not last forever. This pandemic it will be end at some point, and I think that we need to stay the course, and we need to, just follow through on our commitment that we've established and the approval that we've had from the community. And you're right, we can save a lot of money right now with the opportunity to get lower rates and get lower costs on the work. I just think it would be a big mistake for us to stop this and then in 2 or 3 years when the pandemic's all over, we haven't moved forward, and I think we'd regret that.
To piggyback you, Damon, I think when you look at it, the proposed date of this actually finishing is 2023, which is actually a good time because we'll still have Minerva land to use for space should we need it for the next 2 or possibly two, maybe 3 school years, so that when we hopefully can get back to a different normal, we'll have the high school ready. So I think it's really kind of fitting in okay.
We couldn't have planned it any better.
Because we're going to need this every inch of space that we have right now.
Right.
Going back in September. So knowing that we still have Minerva land to access and utilize, that space there is going to be a godsend for us. There are so many schools, like the governor said today, he says, well, you can't build schools overnight, you can't hire twice as many teachers. Okay. We're lucky that we've got space.
If I can add on, but take a different perspective, it's not to change it's to change the course. You say stay the course. I'm not disagreeing with that, and I agree we can probably get more bang for our buck. My question is, what bang for the buck do we want then? Thinking that maybe the CIP2 could be more challenging, do we swap things around? Is that still a possibility? The submission documents have for August 30. Is there a possibility to say we remove this element here and switch it with that and prioritize differently because of what has changed and because the lower borrowing costs, we're going to save money there. Do we just look at it something different? I don't want to say different, that's not really true, but just rearranging.
Adjusting the long-term priorities. But do we have the ability to do that, Peter, or was the vote specific to a certain plan that we proposed?
Right, is it a spend up to, and we can now try and do some way? I don't know. So Brett or Matt, what is our leeway to try? Do we even have that option? So we waste our time.
Remember, a lot of this, and Matt, you could jump in at any point, but a lot of this was based upon phasing, right? Because you can't get it all done in one shot, and it was spread out in a way that allowed us to take care of first things first, and then again. Still, because we don't have any swing space. We can't take the kids at the high school and just move them somewhere else. So the way that it was phased, it was done in a way that it was chunked, and it was done in a way that would be the least disruptive, albeit disruptive. You can't make that all happen at once. So there's a major phasing question that is in mind. And plus, we did go out with a specific project, and Matt, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so, within any capital project, there's always room for changing the work slightly, but it still needs to fall within the seeker resolution language as well as the proposition resolution language. So, those pieces, we work with both the architect, the seeker folks and council to be sure there's enough room to make some slight changes, but it's because of change orders and priorities that come up within the work. But it still has to align within there. So it can't be something that's entirely outside of that language itself.
So Peter, what you suggest is, let's say, for instance, we approved, where is it, 60, we approved 56,750,000, and let's say we go through all that we have planned, and it comes in at 52 million.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go up to, do we take advantage of that up to and get another phase 2 project done in phase 1, or 2 small phase 2 projects? Is that what you're getting at, Pete?
That, or if there was anything that wasn't as important, I don't want to use that word, I suppose, but we think maybe phase 2 things that might be more important to us now because of the situation, and we want to plan for other things. Do we move them into and swap something out? And maybe not swap out, maybe there's enough savings, but again, it's a very generic, high-level idea. I just want to know if we have room to consider that, and maybe with Matt's answer, the answer is no.
Well, we may. I mean, it truly depends. So if there's, for example, Minerva Land, I think it's building envelope work that we talked about in terms of the resolution, but there may be language in there that allows some interior mechanical electrical work to take place and so forth, because it's a district-wide project. So there may be room. It just depends on some of the work that we're looking at doing. We just want to check and make sure that it still qualifies.
So I I would say, though, given the environment that we're in, it is a buyer's market. And this will allow us to get competitive bids, to give us a little bit more room. So there are alternatives that fit into, it's all based on our BCS, right? So, you know, the BCS, as Matt just was referring to, what items could we capture that would fit into the scope of the project and not compromise the seekers or the other reporting obligations that we have. So, you know, there will be opportunities, but I don't think they'll be as transformational as what you were saying.
Will we be able to keep to this time frame? I don't know, maybe I'm being the pessimist here, but I see things as complicated because all the construction work anywhere that should have been going on all this time has not. And when construction starts back up, that all is backlogged and has to be done. Will that affect our timeline in getting the things done in our timely fashion as to what we expected? Or will the backlogs knock everything off?
Joyce, I think mid-June we'll have a better understanding of that, because according to the governor, May 15th, construction and certain construction can start up again. It'll be interesting to see how much of that construction continues and starts up, and whether they are able to move things along faster. I know my brother is in an ancillary construction business, and he said since they've gone to working at home, they have had their best 2 months in the 22 years history of their company. It's amazing, the construction, what they're doing in sales right now. So once construction starts back up and it goes for 4 or 5 weeks, I think we'll have a better understanding. But we also have to understand that in 5 weeks they may say, oh my gosh, we got all these people getting sick with this virus, we can't do construction.
Well, and that's what he said, construction would start up, but still with distancing. So it's not construction in the way that we know it in the past. It's going to be different.
You know, and I do see construction projects. There are some small construction projects here in the village that are taking place, and they're deemed essential because they're people's homes that need to get fixed or finished. So there is some construction going on, but not a lot.
And again, I've heard the scenario multiple different times that the bids that are starting to come in, they're seeing more contractors bidding because the stability and consistency of the work is of high value. And then the value of those bids would be in favor of the school district. But I think you're right, Joyce, time will tell, and you're 100% right. If we don't have a vaccine or antibody testing that's accurate and has high efficacy rates, we could be spinning our wheels, but at least...
And having a vaccine isn't going to be enough. We have to be vaccinated.
Right.
Yeah, but I think, guys, there's just a lot, again, that we just don't know at this point. But I think that in terms of the discussion around the trajectory of the project, I mean, I think that we should double down. I think we should, really commit to this investment and going forward. I think that's a decision we can make right now, understanding that there's going to be variables in the future that we just don't know right now, and we'll adjust as we need to. But I think that pulling back could be a mistake. That's my view.
I think we also need to keep in the back of our mind, even though they said they're going to give us $48,820,000 state aid, even though they say it's guaranteed, in the state we're in, nothing is guaranteed. So we just need to keep that in the back of our mind that they may take some of that away from us.
Well, there's some things you just have to sort of assume, Tim.
Right. So I'm not saying I think we go ahead, but just keep that in the mind that we may, and again, like you said, Damon, bids are coming in lower. We may be okay. They may say, okay, the buffer on that, boom, we're good.
Yeah, I don't know to the degree that if those things happen, I don't want us to be callous. I do agree pushing forward. But let's not forget, though, that there are $45 per year on someone who's lost a job. Does mean, it's just an increase to a bill that they're going to struggle to pay in the first place. Right?
And we also have to realize that they're not paying mortgages or rent right now, but that doesn't mean that they don't ever have to pay that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want us to be insensitive. I don't think we are.
Right.
But
I agree.
Recognize that it's $45 per year. That sounded easier back in December when it was just a coffee once a month. Right now it's food on the table.
Especially when we're providing 500 meals a day.
Yeah.
On the positive side of that, at least the town of Harrington didn't reassess everybody's houses this year, which would have been a lot.
This year.
Yeah, that's coming too.
Right.
Marty, do you have any thoughts? Were you trying to say some thoughts?
No, I just said they didn't reassess this year, but, you know, that's just for this year, so we'll see about that. But I do think that we should proceed because I think in the long run, it's the good time to do it. It will add value to our homes as well, even though there is cost associated with it, and that could be hard for some families. But at the same time, I think when you balance that all out, that it's the right direction to go in.
Yeah, I think we have to proceed, assuming everything will go well, but I agree, in the back, we have to realize that nothing is a given right now. The state just doesn't know where it is, but I say go forward with it, and we see what happens.
And Brad, again, you said that the designing is going on as scheduled and seems to be up and all going forward.
And June will be our
Right.
submittal date, and
Right.
that's why this was important to have this conversation. Of course, this will be an ongoing conversation, but, you know, as you know, the weather, if you look outside, you know, we are in spring sports season, and, you know, I'm hopeful that we'll be in spring sports season again at another point in time, and we'll be able to get maximum use out of a multi-use field, because if we had the same situation, we would not be able to play, and we would, again, be offsetting costs, transporting kids to other venues and you know, having costs associated with you know, that reality. So
are you telling us that you're going to continue that timeline of the replacement of that field right now?
I'm moving forward on that timeline unless, you know, the board says differently, but I'm
And using the funding from this project?
using the funding from this project to complete the multi-purpose field.
Right, because before we were going to take it from a different funding
Yeah,
source.
yeah, I'm talking about the multi-purpose field and the multi-purpose greater fields, the softball, baseball,
Right.
lacrosse, field hockey fields that are in the back, yes.
But it's putting it back into this project, the current.
Yes, correct.
Right. So that cost is coming out of the project where it was initially, instead of through another funding source we had discussed.
Correct, and,
Okay.
Yeah, and we're looking
I
at,
just wanted to make sure that, because we had that discussion a few weeks ago, and I want to make sure that it's still the same discussion.
and just to clarify, the submission to SCD is August, is the date that we have slated for the high school work.
Okay.
but our conversations need to continue, in, you know, June. We want to have, you know, June and pretty much wrapped up, and then July to clean it up, and then August to submit it. So that's why, you know, we're shooting for June to stay on schedule so we can take our time in July and review it. Because, you know, it's ever changing, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think, again, it's not last as long as I thought it might, but the overall guidance from the board is then, right, we are pressing forward, stay to the timeline for now. Obviously, we can always learn new things, but we're moving forward.
And the biggest unknown is going to be when we start discussing phase two.
Yes.
You know, will that, what is that building aid ratio going to be? Will there be a building aid ratio? Who knows?
Yeah, I think that right now anyway, I don't think, from my perspective, we're not ready to talk about phase two. Let's
No, but you know, that's in the back of our mind, and when we get to that point, who knows what that will look like.
Yep.
No regrets that we didn't go out for a $110 million project, time to phase everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know how many times we can say this in the past 9 years, and maybe going back further, but that's the agenda, and it's not quite 7, so I'm a little freaked out.
Yeah.
But these are meaty topics. That's the thing that's, you know, very impressive. This agenda had lots of substance to it, and I know it posed a lot of questions, but, you know, we got through some work.
So in summary, though, because we wanted to try and do better at this, and I'm not sure I'm very good at it regardless, the easiest one, capital improvement project, move forward. In terms of budget timeline, we kind of have our marching orders in terms of the state and the timeline that exists. a lot of unknowns, a lot of things to be figured out in terms of how the ballots work, how we let people know, how we count them, blah, 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 but there's direction there. And you're forming the task force for planning reopening. Did you bring it up? Did I miss it somewhere? Did you want a board member? You said?
I would like to have a board member representative that we can, somebody can come forward, just let Peter know who that would be, to be a liaison, to be part of the conversation, to understand the global parts, and who can communicate with me as we talk about this, because this will be an ongoing public conversation, but it's nice to have a partner to do that with, from my perspective, so.
So if you have any interest, you're welcome to speak up now. So my work is really going gung-ho. I do not have excess time to add that on, so. if there's
I have the excess time. I'd like to do
I'm
that.
unemployed, so I'm available.
Okay, there's two of you. I'm sorry, Joyce, for the one side, but
Yeah.
you have skills. Tim, we know you when you're retired, yes, all that time you keep talking about, but.
I'll put my mother on the, I'll put my mother on the committee. There you go.
And I'll learn something.
Oh, you learn a lot.
Okay,
Thank you.
is there anything else?
Boy, we're more efficient from home, aren't we?
I know.
Yes, one question. Has there been any discussion about when we can get together as a group again in a distance meeting instead of a virtual meeting? And I think, and all of us need to be comfortable with that before I think we can do that. But has there been anything from the governor regarding public meetings?
No? Not yet.
Okay.
I'm sure that will be forthcoming in one of his executive orders that will be coming forth.
Much to
And I just had a quick question. In terms of bus drivers and our need for bus drivers, it seems like now would not be a bad time to be looking for bus drivers or recruiting and figuring out how to train people and stuff.
Agreed. An aggressive.
Are we
campaign.
doing that?
Yes. We're always looking for bus drivers, and we're always trying to, again, think about ways to make it lucrative and, appealing. So when we do come back in session, it's a job they feel good about, and for the sustainability long term. So.
Yeah, I've been talking with Peter about doing some advertising to try and get after that right now. Yep.
And Doug, is there appetite for changing to offer potentially more per hour if they are willing to give up the benefits, meaning they don't need the benefits? And then maybe that's much less likely now. Maybe people need the benefits more than ever, but I don't know if from the FTA's perspective, there's been any appetite to accept that.
We don't want to negotiate in public here.
No, that's true. I'm sorry.
So, again, I know that there's a task force, and, that task force is coming up with all sorts of creative ideas, and we do need to seize this as an opportunity to make it lucrative and make it inviting, because it's a great community. We have, great opportunities that we need to make appealing. So looking forward to talking and seeing that come to fruition.
Okay. Well, thank you. Since we did make it official, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Who was that?
Joyce?
Joyce.
That was Joyce and Judy second.
Second, Judy, thank you. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Very good. Hearing none, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Very well.